President Zelenskyy wrote a letter to President Putin. He wants the two of them to meet to hash out the end of the war in Ukraine because he thinks you are too busy with the war in Iran. Is he right? Well, I don't know. I'm glad that they're maybe talking about meeting. I think we had a lot to do with it. I know exactly what you're doing, but I think it would be great if they met. They should get it done. It's just going to happen. They're going to both make compromises. I suggested those compromises, and, we've had a lot to do with it. Would love to see they're two very good people. They're two very, incredible countries, beautiful countries. They've got to stop. It's Ken Harbaugh with the Midas Touch Network. What we are seeing in real time is the sidelining of America. We used to be referred to as the indispensable nation. Now, we're not even in the room because we have a president who has so degraded our international credibility, who has so undermined our reliability as an ally that, for many of the biggest geopolitical issues of the day, we're worse than irrelevant, we're a liability. Last week, President Zelenskyy of Ukraine wrote an open letter to Vladimir Putin for the whole world to read that cataloged Russia's mounting failures on the battlefield, including casualties topping 30,000 per month and a dependency on North Korea. Zelenskyy pointed out that Ukraine now has the edge and is launching strikes deep into Russia, what the Ukrainians refer to as long-range sanctions. The point of this open letter was to propose direct negotiations with Putin to end the war. This is what it looks like to see a once proud superpower, a country I served as a Navy pilot, become irrelevant through a combination of incompetence and betrayal. I asked Kalin Robertson to join me to talk about Ukraine's position today and about the complicity of those in the West who continue to finance Putin's war machine. You may know Kalin from his insanely brave reporting inside Ukraine. Russia has issued via Interpol an international arrest warrant for Kalin for daring to tell the truth. If that wasn't a high enough honor, this past weekend, President Zelenskyy awarded Kalin Ukraine's Order of Merit for his reporting on the war. We had a great time in this interview. I suspect it will be the first of many. Here's me and Kalin Robertson. Kalin Robertson, thanks so much for joining. When did you find out that you were on the list of awards for the Ukrainian Order of Merit awarded by Zelenskyy? That must have been a bombshell. Were you tipped off? No, it was pretty wild. I speak to Zelenskyy's advisors all the time because I got an interview with him like a few months ago and I was pushing them like every weekend. I thought they were literally going to make a restraining order for that interview. So, but they didn't let me know about this. So it was a pretty wild surprise, and it happened when I was literally covering this big, massive story in Ireland. So I actually just saw it on my newsfeed and I was like, oh, they're giving out awards. Who got it? And then I just saw my name. I was like, oh, I did. That's cool. Yeah, well, I got tipped that Zena, our mutual friend, got it. And I went through the list and like, oh my gosh, I'm talking to Galen tomorrow. This is extraordinary. And you referenced your work in Ireland, which is amazing. I want to talk about it. I have to believe, though, that most of the attention of the Ukrainian government is on your reporting from inside Ukraine. The risks you took, literally these death-dealing dashes through the streets of Köln. I can relate reporting from under deadly skies, literally and metaphorically under drone attack. You've been there, you moved too. Ukraine when you didn't have to. You're not Ukrainian, are you? No, you don't sound Ukrainian. You sound very, very Irish. What motivated you to move to Ukraine and make this your cause? I imagine probably similar thing that motivated you to make your reports there. Just falling in love with the country, the spirit that people have for freedom and democracy, the culture in Ukraine, people loving each other, being caring and just looking out for each other, valuing things that we've kind of forgotten about back home in Ireland. We don't really use the word freedom or democracy much anymore. Every day, it like lives and breathes, beats in the hearts of everyone there, and it's really inspiring. And honestly, I just realized that to be able to do the kind of reporting I wanted to do full time, you got to be there every single day living with Ukrainians under the same kind of fire. So, I had a very comfortable job in London. I was running a TV news outlet called Bind TV. I had producers and I had a nice apartment. I was very comfortable. But after visiting Kyiv for the first time and then going to Donbas and help, filming people being pulled out of Bakhmut back in 2023, I couldn't go back to normal life there. I couldn't have the same conversations with friends about drama and whatever was going on in London before and who was doing what. It just became noise, and I just was fixated on going back. And every story that I did tell, I knew there was like 10, 20 more that I couldn't because I didn't have the time. So I just sold my shares, put everything in a bag, went to and then moved there with no plan. Just started a YouTube channel a year and a half ago. Just thought if you tell the truth and you just put it out there, hopefully people will see the same thing that I'm seeing and hopefully they'll care the same way. And I guess that started to happen, which is kind of wild. You know, you've had a couple viral moments that have really propelled your reporting and your YouTube channel, but there should be a psychological term for this. Was there a personal viral moment where you really got captivated personally by the story? Maybe one that didn't blow up online, but was there a conversation with the Ukrainian that you had that made you realize this has to be what I do for the next few years at least? It was when I first saw Donaz, and the further we drove, the more life just drained, and Ukraine is full of life. But I remember because people were leaving, anyone with, money had left, shops had closed down, and I remember arriving in Crater and there was just smoke in the air from the burning of Bakhmut Rising, and there was wild dogs howling with the air raid sirens and just watching life drain like this. And this one woman in a town called Sever, which is now under Russian occupation, she said, "I need to show you something," and this place was totally under fire. You know how places like this get, grads dropping all the time. And she pulled apart some leaves in the town square, which was really, really bombed, and it showed a tiny flower that had just started to blossom, and she was fixated on this flower, and she didn't flinch when the bombs were going off, and I was trying to film it with my hand shaking with the explosions going off, and I was like, okay, and it was kind of her obsession with one day when this is over, this place will be full of flowers, and they'll, trees that can have shade for the future generations to live under peace, and it was just biblical and amazing and heart, and it was that moment looking at that seed and that flower, I was like, this is a place I feel like I never want to leave. It's amazing. I'm sure you've seen a million other moments just like this. I have. That's beautiful, and it's a testament to the heart that you put into your reporting. My moment was and I'm not as uplifting as yours. I need to, I think, try harder to find those moments in Ukraine. They certainly exist, and I've experienced them. But interviewing the head pediatrician in Inba was that turning point for me. Hey everyone, quick break to say thank you. My last trip to Ukraine was made possible by those of you who signed up for my Substack page. There's a free option too, but the paid subs, which help cover my trips, start at just $8 a month, which actually goes a lot farther than you might think, given how cheap it is to sleep in a trench. I'll be going back, and I'll also be posting frequent updates from the front until then, and we've got the Midas Defense Weekly Substack live on Wednesdays at 11 o'clock a.m. Check that out. And if you haven't yet, please subscribe to the Ken Harbaugh Show Substack channel. Your support is what makes all this possible. Back to the show. I want to ask you about your reporting from Ireland, because this is a little bit of a departure from your on-the-ground war correspondent reporting inside Ukraine. In many ways, it is even more important, though, because you are reporting on the financing of the Russian war machine. I won't put words into your mouth, but what's the story that you're chasing? The story is that Russia's war isn't just in the trenches or with tanks. It's supply chains, it's sports, it's ships that it reaches to Ireland. Ireland is a place I imagine I would only ever go to for peace, rest by maybe like an uncomfortable conversation with an elderly relative about my life choices, but not this kind of stuff. And that is what I found. And there's a refinery that's Russian-owned still 4.5 years into the full-scale invasion is sending hundreds of millions of euros of a white powder called alumina, which is then made into aluminum used in modern warfare in Russia, and these ships leave 14 times a month full of it down the Shannon in the sleepy west coast of Ireland directly to Petersburg, and I watch those ships sail every couple of days, and this has been going on and on and on with minimal outrage, and I wanted to investigate it. So I arrived in the town and started showing that there were signs in Russian everywhere. This has had millions of views because a lot of reporters haven't covered this in Ireland, and it was so blatant, and I said, well, the signs are obviously in Russian, actually, because the politicians are happy to hide this for them, and I'd spoken endlessly to politicians and tried to get further interviews, and no one really wanted to talk about it. So they were pretty much covering up for this because there's a lot of money to be made in that, and honestly, these reports have now had about 8 million views altogether, like twice the population of Southern Ireland, showing local politicians saying that they'd only sanction it if it was happening with other countries like Israel and not, sort of sanctions hypocrisy and other politicians just flat out refusing to acknowledge that it's a problem. And shrugging when I said, do you think it's a bit weird that there are signs in Russian there? We're in West Ireland, for God's sake. And they would say, oh, I guess that is a bit weird. I don't know. I haven't been down there. This is like the major employer. So it was a really weird situation. And then it got very dark. In the last sort of 48 hours, I was getting a huge amounts of threats from people trying to find me. I've been screenshotting this. The Airbnb host that I was staying in had messaged me just after I checked out and said, he's a well-known Airbnb host. People have been calling and asking if I'm staying there. Really dark, weird stuff. because there's a lot of things that people want to cover this up. So it's been dramatic, and it's like the opposite of what you'd expect in like peaceful, neutral Ireland, right? Is this kind of stuff. So it's depressing and really horrible. But as an Irish person, I wanted to go home and show this, even though it's really difficult and uncomfortable, like right on your doorstep. I want to show people how Russia cannot fight this war alone. It needs allies and it needs help, and Ireland is helping them right now, and that needs to be talked about despite how difficult it is. You know, I've seen some of those screenshots of the harassment. We'll put some of those clips up here. It feels like a Russian op. I mean, this doesn't feel like it's coming predominantly from your countrymen. This feels it has all of the hallmarks of a Russian op. Does that sound right to you? Some of it, but some of it is also genuinely people that are just making a lot of money from this. And there is a huge portion of the Irish population that is pro-Russia, pro-communist, anti-NATO, and they just like Russia. You know, a lot of the locations of the accounts that were talking to me and sending me this abuse were based in Ireland. So I'd say it's 50-50ths, but it is obviously Russia excel at this. They're the Russia, I always say, are great at exporting two things, terrorism and lies. So they're very, very good at bombarding us with this kind of stuff. So, but honestly, the uncomfortable truth is Ireland has a problem in its politics with supporting Russia still ideologically and now with the raw material. So anyway, what the main thing I did was, and I didn't want to blow it up too much, is I managed to get a sample of the white powder, which was really hard to get out of Ireland. A, because I had to get it by going in and posing as someone else and taking it, but B, getting fine white powder through an airport and then having to explain to the airport staff that it's actually for a research project, X, Y, and Z also was a little bit difficult, but I managed to do it. But I'm taking it to a laboratory in Hark, and we're going to test it against battlefield debris and prove that that white powder has a similar footprint isotopes to what is going into Russia's supply chain for weapons manufacturing into missiles and drones that are fired into Ukraine. And if that's a match, it proves the link. Sanctions can be put in place. That's the key. So the investigation continues in that form. Now, that's brilliant. I'm looking forward to the results of that. The politicians that you have cornered on this who say that there is no link to the weapons supply chain, are they in denial or are they lying? Both 50-50ths. The politicians in Ireland are pretty corrupt who are associated with this too flat out say in Parliament there's no link to Russia's war machine, but the same politicians said there's no link to the Russian Empire at all. What's going on here, which is without evidence? The politicians in Ireland have no proof where that stuff is ending up unless they're just taking Russia's word for it. Russia's been telling them it's going to step ladders, hundreds of thousands of step ladders every week. Russians must be desperate to get up on a high shelf or whatever, but that's so I would say that. They are financially benefiting. I'm not going to name specific names, but there is a rot that has set in. You could honestly feel it when you're talking to someone. You know this as a journalist as well. You can kind of see behind someone's eyes if they've got something to hide.